So that moves us over to the East that had a little more positive notes on their headline game, and that's Georgia-Notre Dame, a game that we picked for Georgia to win. And I did not realize this until I saw the broadcast on TV, just how many Georgia fans traveled for this game, and you could feel it even in like the comment section on our show about the game, and just how engaged Georgia fans were with this game. It's crazy how a name team that went 4-8 last year can mean so much in terms of just mental psyche for not just a fan base but a team. So that was a really fun game, and like you touched on in our West review, Georgia showed that they have just like the raw athleticism and talent that we said going into this game would be to their advantage over a Notre Dame. But what they lacked, I thought, was real production at quarterback and real organization offensively and defensively in terms of not making stupid mistakes, and really being able to capitalize when Notre Dame made mistakes, which they missed out on a couple of big opportunities. So just walk us through what you saw in this game. Was it what you expected? And then tell me, I guess, in your walking through this game for me, tell me two things. One, what did you see that you expected going in this game that was confirmed? And two, what did you see in this game from Georgia that you didn't expect?
Well, I think the first thing that I expected, and I was wrong. I mean, I thought Georgia would actually win fairly handily, and they didn't. But the first thing I saw was that Georgia ran the ball pretty darn successfully. Took a lot of heat from Notre Dame fans when I said they were. People interpreted this as me saying they were Appalachian State was a lot better than them or more physical. No, Appalachian State was just very, very good last year against the run, 10th in the country. They got blown out because they were over, I think, worse than 100th against the pass, which is why Miami killed them. And then they played Tennessee real close. But, Georgia averaged about 5 yards per carry against App State, and they averaged about 4.5 against Notre Dame. So they ran the ball well. Sony Michel averaged 5.6 yards per carry. Chubb averaged 4.8 yards per carry. Swift had 42 yards in a couple plays. So they moved it well through the air, and the defensive line really stifled Notre Dame. They allowed 1.5 yard per carry rushing by Notre Dame. I don't think that's gotten anywhere near enough play. Just how badly Notre Dame actually did running the football. And as much as Fromm had 4.9 yards per attempt, which was rough, frankly, again, Wimbush had 5.4 yards per attempt. It had very similar QBRs, completion percentage right below 50%. The only difference is Georgia could run the ball and Notre Dame could not. That's what I expect. What I didn't expect was, I don't know any way to put it other than discombobulation. I mean, there was a series in the third quarter where Fromm threw a pretty nice deep ball that should have been a touchdown. It was dropped, went right through the receiver's hands over the middle. The next play was a false start. The play after that was about a 6-yard run. The next play was a dropped screen pass that resulted in a punt. And that was Georgia. It felt like the entire game to me. It was just, you could see the talent was there. And I felt like as much as the score was close, Notre Dame was actually really badly outmatched in that game on both sides of the ball, pretty much at all times. Much more so, Georgia's defense had a huge edge on Notre Dame's offense. But I actually still felt like Georgia probably had an edge on offense against Notre Dame. But they're just discombobulated at all times and just never quite clicking the way they needed to be. The defense was usually pretty good, but they would get out of position and gave up a lot of points they probably shouldn't have, a lot of third downs they shouldn't have. And then the offense, like I said, I mean, you get 3 plays and you get 2 drop passes that killed 2 first downs. I mean, it's just brutal.
I was kind of impressed with how fundamentally sound Notre Dame was on defense. And I know this is an SEC channel, and we're going to talk about the SEC, and I'll circle this back around to Georgia, I promise. But Georgia, like you said, completely outmatched them athletically, were superior athletically, and it almost didn't matter because Notre Dame was so fundamentally sound on defense that they were able to sort of neutralize that speed advantage, um, and take advantage of the fact that they didn't have they weren't facing a quarterback that would completely scare them, like, maybe even an Eason would if they had him in there and not Fromm. I thought Fromm held his own. I do see why Eason was the starter over him, but I do think that there's a lot of good to take away from that. If for nothing else, that kind of experience and leaving there with a win. I don't care what Notre Dame does the rest of the year. Mentally, that's got to be a boost to these players. And I know we usually talk about numbers and we don't dig into the gut of a player and the psyche of a player, but mentally, look, Notre Dame's Notre Dame. And you beat them, and it's a big deal. You beat them on the road, it's an even bigger deal. And to have so many fans there supporting him, I think was huge too. So if you look at the play of Fromm in week 2, you saw him week 1. Let's say he has to play the whole season out as the starter. Does he have the type of skill set that lends himself to improving a whole lot between week 2 and week 12, or are we looking at something where he's going to need this season plus an off season to be that stone cold killer at quarterback?
Frankly, I think it's probably more the latter. Fromm is a gamer, and he can come in and he can immediately be a serviceable quarterback. I mean, they're playing a pretty darn good team, I think, at Notre Dame. They're not going to be a 4-8 team this year, but Fromm's skill set is a bit like Sean White with Auburn, and he comes in and he finds a way to make plays and move the ball around. But it's not so much his sheer arm talent or accuracy or any of that really. It's just that he manages his position well and gets the ball out of his hand. So it's, especially when you come in as a freshman, I've heard he knows about a third to half the playbook. They're not going to really have time to change that too much, honestly, because week to week, every week you have to install the specific game plan for the team you're playing. You don't have time to install the playbook generally. You just focus on whatever new plays you're developing or whatever wrinkles you have for that opponent, and you figure out the 10 to 15 plays that are key plays for that game. And there's not much of a chance to catch a quarterback up over the course of the season. There's just not. And so I don't know that he's going to improve a ton. It's tough. Most quarterbacks, the biggest jump is freshman to sophomore year, and it's because of that off-season camp. They got experience. They have a ton of film to watch to see where they screwed up, and they spend all off-season doing nothing but running the same generic plays over and over. But I do think it's different than Eason, who has more talent than Fromm, but isn't as, I hate to say between the years because it's not like Eason's stupid. That's not what I'm saying at all. Just there's sort of a moxie and comfortability that Fromm has coming in that's actually probably honestly more advanced now than Eason was. Eason was even at the start of the year. But no, a lot of it really will be the fact that they may want to put Eason in just because as long as Fromm's in, you're running about half the playbook. And whether he's good or bad at it, there's about half the plays you can't run because he doesn't know what to do. And Eason, by letting you run more plays, you end up more successful just by virtue of the fact that you have more things to run and more ways to keep an opponent off balance. It's the same reason that Auburn's using Stidham, because Sean White only can physically execute a certain portion of the playbook. Stidham can complete all the throws in the field. In theory, your playbook's more open, you're more successful. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it turns out because you never really know what's going to happen.
So a big win for Georgia, a big win for South Carolina against Missouri in a game that Missouri was favored, even coming off of a pretty abysmal opening defensive performance from Missouri. It was very abysmal, not pretty abysmal. And a big win for Carolina against NC State. Carolina was still a dog coming into this game, and then comes out and wins it really comfortably. I don't know what to think about South Carolina yet. I so want to jump on the bandwagon because I like Bentley. I like Sky Moore a lot on defense. Deebo Samuel is like an emerging superstar for them. But something's holding me back, and I don't know what it is. Give me just give me the green light to go ahead and jump on the South Carolina bandwagon. Don't break my heart. Tell me I can do it.
Do I have to? Can I break your heart just a little bit?
Just be honest. We're honest here.
Okay. Well, I think the good news is the same as the bad news, and this is the second game in a row South Carolina has won despite having
Bad statistics.
being outgained by 100 yards. I mean, they got doubled up by North Carolina State and won in a close game. In this game, they were outgained 423 to 359 and almost tripled their opponent's score. And you can watch the game and feel like you know why it is, but I mean, it's hard to put my finger on it because you look at it, well, okay, they got points off turnovers, so 3 turnovers in the game. That was definitely important. But, Missouri averaged more yards per attempt than South Carolina. They averaged more yards per carry than South Carolina. They didn't really ran right at the same number of plays. Somehow, I think part of it is South Carolina dominated time of possession, 37 minutes to 22. Played Will Muschamp football. And I don't know. I mean, it's the silver lining is none of this makes sense, but it's working.
I think it's also one of those situations, though, where 2 weeks in a row, you have what's probably an okay offense steal 7 points. And not steal, I mean, they earn the points, but steal 7 points from a kickoff return. I mean, it's so hard to explain how big of a deal a 97-yard kick return is to a struggling offense. Like, those points are gold, and they're getting them when, they might otherwise have gone 3 and out. So that's a huge deal to me.
Yeah, and I think part of it, too, with Locke is Missouri got their yardage really in chunks. I mean, Locke was about 40% passing in this game. They had a couple 60, 40-yard receptions that really boosted their numbers. But the truth is, they couldn't really consistently move the ball through the air. And that was the problem is South Carolina, it's kind of interesting to see because it's Will Muschamp football that works. They're getting 5-6 yards a play. The Williams rushed for 5.6 yards per carry. Bentley's throwing for 6.7 yards per attempt. And they're just moving the chains, getting down the field, sustaining drives, and just slowly building up points on the board and dominating time of possession. And then the flip side, Missouri tried to be a quick strike offense, and they got some chunk plays, but is way too inconsistent. And we've talked about this a lot. If I can get a 30-yard play, 1 out of every 5 plays, I may theoretically get 6 yards per play, but I ain't going to have a lot of first downs, and I'm going to have a lot of 3 and outs.
Right.
And I'm going to get stomped. So if I can get 6 yards per play every play, or get 30 yards every 5 plays, the team getting 6 yards per play is going to just stomp a mud hole in the team that gets 30 yards every 5 plays. And behind the numbers, that is exactly what happened in this game. South Carolina could pretty well consistently get their 5-6 yards per play, move the chains. I mean, not, absolutely not every play. I mean, it like you said, offense scores 24 points or whatnot, but they could move the ball, and Missouri had no consistency. So they couldn't sustain drives really at all. And I think it's reflected in some of the advanced stats that you see. Jake Bentley had fewer yards passing than Locke, but he didn't have 2 interceptions. And the QBR for Bentley is 62.3. That's ESPN's weird metric. Pretty darn good. QBR for Drew Lock, 14.5.
Pretty darn bad.
Pretty darn bad, even though he had more yards per attempt than Bentley, one of our favorite stats. 7.7 for Locke, 6.7 for Bentley. But when you talk about efficiency and success rate, terrible for Locke. When you talk about touchdown to interception ratio, bad for Locke. So all those little things that are, considered the sort of hidden keys to win the game, that's where South Carolina right now is excelling. And that's why they're doing better, frankly, than their stats would suggest.
I think last year South Carolina struggled, obviously, but what I saw from South Carolina was a team that at times was playing really, really good defense. No surprise, Will Muschamp, but had a complete void offensively that if they just got a little bit, it would push them over the top and get them some wins where they were otherwise getting losses. And I think that's what we're getting this year. We're seeing just enough from Jake Bentley. We're seeing just enough from the South Carolina offense to complement a really good, so far, defense. And the place where I think we need to pause a little bit, and myself included, because I'm trying to jump on the South Carolina bandwagon, is we need to pause on Jake Bentley, who I think has some of that moxie that you were talking about that Jake Fromm had that maybe Eason didn't have. I think Bentley's got it in spades, and he had it last year too. So we tend to think about him that he's one of the top quarterbacks out there because we see him taking a team that has been losing and winning the ball game, and we see him have that moxie on the field and be a good leader. The jury is still out for me on Bentley. Even in this game, 18 for 28, 187 yards, 6.7 per and 1 touchdown. There's some immeasurables there that don't show up in the stat sheet that he brings to the table, but there are also some things that are starting to concern me this year where I hoped he would take those things that weren't showing up on the stat sheet and combine a better passing attack with it, and I don't know that he's there yet. Is it fair for me to still be on the fence for Jake Bentley?
I kind of think so. Bentley, we talked about this quite a bit. He's just kind of inconsistent. He flashes a really high level of potential, and he'll make great plays. And then quietly he'll throw 3 or 4 ugly incompletions in a row. And if you watch highlights of South Carolina, Bentley looks awesome. It's the same thing, to a much greater degree, it's the same thing with Nick Fitzgerald. If you watch highlights of Nick Fitzgerald, and that's all the ESPN guys see, he looks awesome, man. He's throwing the ball down the field, 50 yards, throwing strikes. What they don't see is, those non-highlight plays, he's just all over the freaking place. It's like watching somebody play darts where the only clips you show are the bullseye. But the truth is the guy's been blindfolded and he's just throwing them blind. And randomly he'll hit a bullseye. I'm not saying that Bentley's blindfolded and okay, let's take a step back there. But what I am saying is he needs a way more consistency to move the ball better. And he has the potential to be an elite quarterback and, be a 70% passer. And this offense could really be humming. But that would require him to actually be a 70% passer and be that consistent and accurate. And instead what you've got is a guy that for a series or two can look phenomenal and get a couple touchdowns on the board, but he's not quite at the level of doing that drive after drive the way we would both kind of like to see for him to take the next step to be a dominant quarterback in the conference.
So we've got the next 6 games for South Carolina are Kentucky, La Tech, A&M, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt. I could see them winning 5 out of 6, and kind of like we talked about in our West show, right now on paper they might be favored in every one of those games, but I could see them winning. I think being charitable, being just kind of open-minded, 5 out of 6 there. We might be looking at an 8-win plus 8-9-win season for South Carolina without getting too crazy, because I thought the big hurdles for them were early with NC State and Missouri, and they came out bang bang with wins. Is that crazy?
No, I don't think it is. In fact, depending on how it turns out the next few weeks and if they could beat Tennessee, I think it's very possible that we're going to be in the month of November and South Carolina is going to be squarely in the hunt for the division title.
All right, one more team I want to talk about in the East, Vanderbilt. We don't ever talk about Vanderbilt unless we're killing them, so I think it's fair that we give them a little bit of love. You're going to tell me that they played 2 crappy teams and that we shouldn't be excited about Vanderbilt, but I'm going to tell you, before you tell me that, so you don't have to tell me that Vanderbilt's winning in a way against crappy teams that they're not necessarily known for. So maybe, just maybe, blowing out the teams that they should because they're better than them is a sign that they're turning the corner. Is that possible?
It's possible.
Don't be too excited now.
Well, I mean, Middle Tennessee State did beat Syracuse last week, so they're good, right? And we're not gonna look at the fact that UAB kind of throttled Alabama A&M in the opener. Uh, I mean, yeah, they look good. They look competent. Their offense is moving the ball. It's more than we can say in some years past. But yeah, I'm you know me. I'm a pessimist, and I like to be shown things, and I think that's generally may not be as fun as some people are, but I think I'm more often than not it ends up being proven right. And the truth of the matter is, the Middle Tennessee State and Alabama A&M are just not. They're not just not quality opponents. They're really really bad teams. And just like when Mississippi State was playing Louisiana Tech, Mississippi State got 9 possessions in that game, and they had Louisiana Tech in a third and goal from the Louisiana Tech's own 7, 93 yards to go to score. Sometimes you play teams like that are not just in a lower division, but they're just bad on top of it, and things are easy no matter what you do. Vanderbilt's had those games so far, and this upcoming game against Kansas State, which we've given a little bit of short shrift to. It's going to be a really big measuring stick for them, especially since they have the fun, wonderful ability to play Kansas State, Alabama, Florida, and Georgia in a row for the next 4 games. So we're going to learn out quick, fast, in a hurry if Vanderbilt is back or if Vanderbilt's not. And the shame of it is maybe they'd have a shot against Florida or Georgia, but it's going to be brutal to try to beat Georgia on the end of that 4-game stretch.
Here's why I've got a little bit of a silver lining in this Vanderbilt cloud. Last year, Middle Tennessee State 47-24, Western Kentucky 31-30 in overtime, and Tennessee State 35-17. So these are 3 bad teams last year that they struggled with, all 3 of them. One, Western Kentucky took them to overtime, and that wasn't a good that's not your Willie Taggart coached Western Kentucky team. That was a bad Western Kentucky team. So for me, there's a silver lining because I want to give credit when teams take care of business against teams they're supposed to beat, and I'm doing that with Vanderbilt. I think they're going to give Kansas State a lot of trouble. I don't think they're going to beat them. If they do, we're certainly going to talk about it. But I would not be shocked if that's a 17-14 type game. I wouldn't be shocked at all. Anything else on the East this week, or are you ready to hang up? Because it is pushing midnight where you are.
Yeah, you're gonna turn me into a pumpkin, man. I think the East is the more interesting division, just in terms of who's gonna do well, and I think my overall thing in the East is I do think there's a pretty good chance that there's gonna be 1 or 2 teams that turn a corner at some point this season, the way teams sometimes do. Tennessee kind of turned it on at a certain point late last year after struggling mightily in the middle of the year.
Then they turned it off.
Yeah, light switch, trash can. They got your back, but
we had to get the trash can in this week. Sorry, it had to happen, and we found a way.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but you can't. It's a trash can, man.
No.
I think they may. Somebody in the East is going to turn it on, and right now I think it's probably Georgia. I mean, they're the ones that got the talent that they could start clicking. They could become a darn good team overnight if things get clicking. And Florida, if they ever get their guys back from suspension, then they could turn into a dangerous team. So, I think the East actually has a tremendous amount of potential. It just ain't there yet.
I think the East is more fun to watch right now, and Georgia was my pick to win the East when we in our preview show before the season started. I'm sticking with that, but South Carolina is my fun, sexy pick to go, 8-4, 9-3, which would be a huge win for the very wonderful fans up there in Columbia. I think people don't realize that aren't big South Carolina fans or don't know much about them. They will sell out that stadium. They'll sell out Williams-Brice in a 4-8 season, and not a lot of teams will do that. So they don't get a lot of credit for how great of a fan base they are. Anyway, really late. Gonna have to hang this one up, but it's been fun. We got a lot of talking in for not a great week of football coming up, but y'all Please enjoy your weekend watching some college football. Please comment on our videos. We'd love to mix it up with you in the comments. So also, if you like it, we want a like from you. If you hate it, we want a thumbs down from you and a comment from you. If you really like it, we'd love a subscribe. It helps us let you know when we got new videos coming out every week, because we have a lot of people that ask us when things are going to be posted. If you subscribe, you'll always get that notification. Anyway, it's late, y'all. Thanks so much. Have a great week. God bless.